Hey guys, it's Mitchell from Australasian SXS. We're back testing a Polaris Ranger XP1000 in camo. We've got it on our cattle farm and we're keen to put it to work, put it through several tests to test its capabilities. But before we get into the testing, let's quickly run through the features of this vehicle and what makes it Polaris's kind of feature work machine. Up the front, let's start with the motor. This 999cc ProStar engine comes with 82 horsepower. Which is pretty good. Moving to inside the cab, the steering wheel is bigger than most of the Razor and General models. It's that typical Ranger bus-like steering wheel, and you actually sit quite high up and upright in this particular model, so you kind of sit on top of the steering wheel. The steering wheel is adjustable. You can just put it up and down in your lap. It's not telescopic, so it doesn't come forward and back either. On the dash, it displays all the normal stuff you'd expect, like fuel and revs and hours and everything else that comes with the standard Ranger dash. This particular model is the 3-seat bench model. It comes loaded with cup holders. There's 6 cup holders as far as we could count, and 2 decent glove boxes and a storage compartment underneath. It does still come with the standard SAC suspension, so we'll be keen to put that to work to see how it handles the different size loads that this vehicle is rated to tow. The Ranger XP1000 has nearly 30 centimetres of suspension travel, and it has some pretty flash alloy rims with those new Maxxis tyres, which we've been told are better than the standard Polaris branded tyre. So that big motor is rated to tow around about 1.2 tonne. So we've got a bit of watering we've got to do with the calves, and we'll have probably about a tonne and a bit in the back, not including the trailer. So we're going to really push that to its limits and see how it goes towing to its capacity. So this particular model came with the up-spec tub that we're testing today. So it's the fully hydraulic tub, so we can kind of lift it up and down using a switch on the inside. It is rated to take nearly half a tonne, about 450 kilos. So again, we've got a bunch of work we're going to be putting in it, fencing gear and other things, so we'll see how it kind of goes with that weight plus what we're towing. All right, that's it. We've spent the last couple of weeks putting the Polaris Ranger XP1000 to work and a little bit of play. That's probably the best way to describe this vehicle, is to break it up into two segments as opposed to how we've done things in the past. So we're going to break down our review into work and performance. So we'll start with work, and the first thing we loved about this vehicle was the towing capacity. I think it's rated to tow 1.19-ish tonne. We probably had 1.5 tonne on the tow ball, between a 400 kilo trailer and 1 tonne worth of water for weaning. We were able to pull in low range out of a boggy dam and back up to the yards and to the water trough with no problem. And even going downhill, it kind of kept it under 10 kilometres an hour without even touching the brake, and that's with about 1.5 tonne of the trailer. So as a towing vehicle, it gets a big thumbs up from us. So the other thing that we really liked about this vehicle for work was the tray. The XP1000 is quite wide, and that means you've got quite a wide tray, and it takes about half a tonne, it says, as a load carrying capacity. We fitted probably more than that, and a few other bits and pieces for work, and it also did it totally fine. It's got a little grippy tray, which is good, so it can kind of hold onto the chainsaw and other bits and pieces instead of sliding around without even a strap around it. And it also protected it when we threw rocks and logs and stuff like that into it. This is an up-spec tray. It's the electronic lifter tray. So you control that on the inside of the cab just with 2 arrows, and that was good for kind of dumping stuff out the back. It just means you don't have to get out of the vehicle and grab that lever and unclick it so that the tray comes up. So we like the electronic tipper, and yeah, we were able to take at least half a tonne, probably more, without even really feeling the effect on the handling of the vehicle, how it drives. Again, this vehicle doesn't have active descent control, which is something that Polaris hangs its hat on, that ADC, but in low range, going downhill with half a tonne in the tray, it would hardly get over 2 or 3 kilometres an hour on a pretty steep descent without using the brake. We also used the Ranger XP1000 for mustering. We had to move some cattle around. In low range, it doesn't put as much pressure on the belts, so we kind of just were able to crawl along, just pushing the throttle at say 10 kilometres an hour, pretty nicely behind cattle without it jerking or stopping and jerking, like some of the more performance-based side-by-sides can be, even in the Polaris range, like the Generals. So we found it really good because the motor's actually quiet. Before this vehicle, we had a Razor 1000 Trail S, and the motor's quite loud, but because it's quiet, it kind of meant we could get around under cattle before they noticed it to get it moving in the right direction, before just simply startling them by coming into a gate. So the noise was actually really good, and the speed at which it could crawl was really good, and lots of visibility because you're sitting up quite high in the cab. And the last aspect of this vehicle that we really liked for work was the winches. I say that plural because there's one at the back and there's one at the front, and the bull bar. The one at the front, pretty straightforward. Everyone's had a winch before on their vehicle. It's good for pulling you out of a bog and occasionally pulling a fence post up or something like that. Same with the bull bar, good for nudging gates if they've swung shut. Also good for pushing posts around and other bits and pieces and pushing through the scrub. So that's been handy, and it's a pretty tough, strong bull bar. But our favourite of those 3 things was actually the rear winch. We showed a few neighbouring farms around here how well it works. We were able to drag huge logs into the tray because we could tip the tray up that we wouldn't otherwise be able to lift with our hands, and we were also able to lift a carcass or something into the tray too. So the rear winch was actually for us more handy than the front winch. I think you've got to be going pretty challenging spots or doing some significant amount of pulling in order to use that front winch. If I had to pick between either, I'd actually start by bolting on a rear winch before I bolted anything else on, purely from a work perspective. Alright, so that's it for the Ranger XP1000 and how it goes in a work environment. It is 1000cc, so we kind of had a bit of fun with it too. So let's look at it and how it performs and its performance. This machine, it is designed just to work and work all day. It wants to be run 8 to 10 hours a day, and it wants to just continually work. But you can kind of get it in and out of gullies with a bit of fun, and you can kind of hook around the paddocks with a little extra enjoyment than you could out of, say, a 570. So let's have a look at those aspects of performance that we really liked with this XP1000. All right, like I said, that engine, that ProStar 999cc engine, is an absolute cracker. We've always liked it. The cool thing about this particular XP1000 model is you get 3 engine maps to pick from. It doesn't change your total horsepower or anything, it just changes the way power comes on. So you've got performance, standard and work, and in the performance mode it's just a little more touchy, so if you're kind of just trying to get from one end of the property to the other, you can put in performance mode and flog down a fire road pretty easily on and off the throttle. And then obviously the standard mode is pretty straightforward, and then the work mode just had a little bit more delay in throttle response when you put your foot down, which would be good if you're in and out of cattle and over rocky terrain and you don't want it to kind of keep jerking and spinning up. Another thing to look at would be the handling. Kind of an interesting vehicle to sit in. You stick quite upright and quite high, and the steering wheel I feel is bigger than previous models that we've tested. So think of it like a bus. That's your seated position. You're upright, you kind of hold the steering wheel in your lap like this. We really liked the electronic power steering. It's incredibly light. You can do it with one finger. The downside to the electronic power steering is that it's not like the power steering in your car where it's quite accurate with how far you turn it. So we found ourselves having to turn it that little bit extra around in order to get the wheels to turn where we wanted them to go. So it won't be as accurate when it comes to steering as, say, any of the Razor or any of the general model. Now, this is a Ranger, so that means that the suspension is the base model suspension. So it's quite soft. We hit a lot of holes and rocks. We've got a lot of feed at the moment, so it's kind of hard to see those things. And you definitely knew it when you hit them. You could hear the big clunk because it kind of max out the suspension. And then when you're chasing a few cows that want to go the wrong way, kind of when you're hooking into it, the body roll on it is significant compared to, like I said, that Razor Trail S1000 that we had that was so planted because the suspension was so firm. So in terms of that body roll, it does body roll pretty hard. It's quite a top-heavy machine, but again, you're not racing it. Benefit of that suspension is that when you're hitting lots of little potholes and lots of little rocks, you don't feel them. It's like a magic carpet ride. But if you do whack a rock you can't see, you'll certainly hear it from within the cab. Still on the handling, and one of our favourite parts was actually these tyres. These are the Maxxis MU511 tyres, and they have a really wide tread pattern, and it's a really quite aggressive tread pattern. It's almost square when you look at it from behind. We actually found ourselves leaving the vehicle in that Versatrack mode. You could leave it in that mode and drive through mud potholes, through slippery green grass, and still get traction because these Maxxis tyres hook up so well. That's it from us with the Polaris XP1000 for now. It's an absolute workhorse, this thing. It just wanted to run all day, which is awesome as a work companion. This model we've got has actually got about 400 hours on it that we're testing today. Still, it started first time every go. We never had any problem with any electronics, which is what you get when you buy a premium brand. You know all those wiring looms heat shrinked correctly. So it's been superb. We can't wait to put more hours on it. We'll do a little bit more testing. We'll come back to you in another 3 to 6 months' time once we've had a chance to really see what else we can come up with that we'd like to see them change, and we'll let you know how we're travelling.